Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're meeting an adventurer who lives by the belief that if you constantly feel like you're meant to be doing something else, then you probably are. She's let that idea guide her journey, and as she continues navigating the spiral of life, each adventure brings her closer to the person she's becoming. Joining us from Toronto, Canada is Melissa Rodway. Melissa has quite literally adventured her way through life, collecting meaningful travel experiences that have shaped who she is today. She's the host of the Fly Radio Travel Podcast and the author of The People You Meet, Luxury, Leeches, Love, and Lao Lao, with a host of interesting characters in Southeast Asia. It's a book I just finished reading, and I highly enjoyed it. Her book chronicles her multi-month journey through Southeast Asia, including Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and China. A trip filled with new cultures, unforgettable characters, and a blend of both luxury and low-budget travel moments. Melissa brings a unique perspective on the value of travel and how each experience, big or small, can transform us. I'm excited to share her story, her insights, and her adventurous spirit with you all today. Melissa, welcome to Campfire.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. What a pleasure to be here. And I love that video. How cool is that? That makes me inspired.
So excited. This is going to be so much fun. We got on the call this morning, and before we hit the record button, I had to acknowledge that I feel like I know you so much better than you know me at this point, because I got a chance to read the whole book. I love the way that it's written. It's so like authentically you. We'll get into, I guess, the background and how that kind of the stories came about. But today we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the content of that book and your trip to the Southeast. And before we do that, I was kind of looking into your story a little bit more this morning beyond the book, just, more of the adventures and things. And one of the things that just really caught my attention on your website was that quote that I read in the intro: if you constantly feel like you're meant to be doing something else, then you probably are. And I wondered if we could just start with that.
Yeah. So it's funny you brought that up, because I'm having a moment in my life right now where it's good you reminded me of that. I think there's a lot to that. So for me, I feel, and you probably know this from reading my website, is that I probably didn't always, have the smartest path in finding jobs and career and all of that. And so for me, there's always or frequently been an agitation or a discomfort in my body when I know that I'm really not doing the things that feed me or speak to me or make me feel alive. And I think we ignore that voice a lot of the time. And even that's even in my book, where you're like, well, if I change my job or I change the city or I do whatever, that feeling will go away. And it doesn't until you fix the problem and that you start listening and dialing into things that, light you up. And I think writing has also proven that to me. I can feel very agitated or something's not feeling right. And the second you tap into something that you're good at or that feeds you or turns the light on, your body settles again. So yeah, there's a lot to that statement. There's a lot of discomfort we just put up with.
And I love that you use the word agitation. It's a very physical word. It's not like a thought, like a disruptive thought that just keeps coming back, that we have a question. Like sometimes we doubt and we question. I mean, this is literally, you're literally talking about physical agitation.
Yeah, I have that physical agitation a lot if I ignore and the things that I like. And I think as we get older, it gets easier, right? And I think about this a lot. It's really quite simple. I mean, in my life, I love to be outside. I love fitness and exercise. I love to write. I love to read. I love to do funny things. Like, I took a comedy course and that kind of stuff. I guess the creative part, right? So I think we make it a lot harder than what it needs to be. And when you just start breaking it down, we're all pretty simple people. We just stop listening to these things that bring us joy. So yeah, it can be agitating.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have to come back to that. This idea of the fact that we stop listening. We're going to come back to that. So today we're going to kind of cover a little your story that's in the book about this trip that you took to Southeast Asia, which really is just one of many adventures that you've had. But I wonder if we can start there and kind of talk about how it came about. And actually, I'm thinking about this in the spirit of this agitation that you felt. Was there an agitation that triggered that trip?
100%. Yes. So I was 35 at the time, 51 now, and so much wiser. So 35. And as I was saying, I wasn't in love with my job. I never wanted to have kids, so that wasn't a problem. I didn't have a lot, to keep me in Toronto. And I had this partner who I had met on another trip. He was from England. I was from Canada. And he was wanting to start a business in luxury travel. And we had traveled together for 4 years at this point, off and on. So we were very much in tune with how that worked for us. But he wanted to make connections with hotels and tour operators in that part of the world, Southeast Asia. And so I was going along for the ride. Why wouldn't I do that? So I quit my job and off we went. And when you are with somebody who has a purpose and you are the plus one, just, la-di-daing, every day, it's interesting, right? And that was something that we didn't know would happen, or we'd never really talked about it. You don't know what you don't know. But after about week 3 or 4, I started getting really agitated again. And I had nothing. Really, there's no reason, it's really fun wandering around, but you get to a certain age when wandering doesn't really fill your boots after a while. So when you're with someone who's got meetings and they're going on hotel inspections, and I would go to some of those too, but it wasn't my dream. It wasn't my goal. So I started, we'd be on long buses, long train rides for 18, 36 hours. And I started creating these stories in my head about where we were going, what we were seeing, what we were doing. And then once a week, I would find an internet cafe or, a hotel with a lobby in it. And let me tell you that many people that have interviewed me that are, not even 40 look at me like I have 3 heads when I say internet cafe, but we didn't have phones, right?
Right.
So that was my weekly thing. And so that became my purpose. And I was sending these emails to friends and family of these stories, and people loved them. And that wasn't the reason, but that certainly helped. And then that sort of made me feel like, okay, once a week, I'm going to send out these stories. And that became my purpose. And that settled my agitation on that trip. And then 15 years later, those emails became a book. But I think this whole, the word agitation is a constant in my life. And so you can even, leading up to that, I wasn't in love with my job. What am I doing? What am I going to do next? So there's that, which kind of forced me to make the decision to go on the trip. But then even when you're on a trip, a lot of people who don't have adventures or they don't travel think that everything's beautiful and wonderful and fabulous. And it's not. Traveling's hard. It's tiring. It's dirty. It's messy. It can be scary. And no matter what, you're still you. You've taken yourself from Toronto to somewhere else. You're in the same head. You can't escape yourself. So, there we are.
It's so interesting that, you go on you're on this adventure, you were still feeling the agitation, and it was writing that helped you kind of heal that agitation in the moments.
Totally. And then I forgot about that, so it's taken me 15 years to remember that is something that calms me. And it's in revisiting this book and editing it and putting it out. And then even, I've started doing some more writing, because in that process, I learned that exactly what you said, when I start feeling something's not aligned or misaligned, as soon as I sit down to write, order is restored. But isn't it funny? It took me 15 years to remember that. Oh, life.
So man, I want to jump into this trip, but you keep dropping these nuggets. Order is restored.
Mm.
What does that mean? And what does that feel like?
I think, we live in a world where, especially in the Western world, where we're never satiated. Nothing is enough. You get this job, it pays you more, you move into a bigger place, you get a car, you do whatever. And I personally have never really lived by those rules. I just got my first car like 3 years ago in my late 40s. But I think there's a constant searching, right? For things to fill the void and for things to make you feel better. And it just doesn't always do that. And I think it's like we look outside of ourselves constantly. Mm-hmm. And I did that for a very, very long time. And I think we're not taught as young people, and certainly in my generation, we were not. And I'm assuming we're a similar generation somewhere along there. Nobody said to you when you're 8 years old, or certainly not in my world, if you sing or if you dance or if you cut the grass or if you... whatever it is that you're doing, if all of a sudden your inner being and your soul, and whatever words we use for someone who's a young person, you describe lighting up to them, follow that feeling. Don't forget that feeling. And I think that we're often led to believe that everyone feels like you do. So I loved being in choirs. I loved being in little school plays. I loved writing skits. I loved doing all that. I didn't realize that not everybody love that. You think that we're all in this and it's the same, and it's not. We're all different. And there's nobody that kind of says like, keep doing the things that light you up, that make you feel good. And I wish someone had done that for me, because I think you go through life constantly kind of like, thinking that this will work, thinking that will work, trying new things, and then not realizing like you had the answer all along. It was here. And somewhere along the way you were told not to listen, or you decided not to listen, or you didn't realize that was who you authentically were. And when you tap in, order is restored, right? You're living how you're supposed to live in this body, in these talents.
And the order is restored. And yet, in your little quote, if you constantly feel like you're meant to be doing something else, then you probably are. That's once you've restored order, the process can start over again, right?
Totally.
I mean, this thing that lights you up today may not light you up in 5 years. So I think like a lot of people have this, we're searching for this like one thing, but like even once you find that one thing may not be your like lifetime thing.
You're totally right. Even this New Year's Eve, I went out to an 80s party, and I used to love 80s music and dancing. And I was like, oh my God, I am not into this anymore. What has happened? So it can be even little things, like we change all the time. Yeah. And it's paying attention to the changes and not feeling badly about something that maybe you liked 7 years ago is not cutting it anymore. That's okay. We're allowed. And I think sometimes we feel badly about that, right? We want to hold on to what's familiar and recreate feelings and experiences. And it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it too, it's like, we search for this thing where we can kind of tell ourselves like, okay, I know my purpose. I was put here to do this, and that feels good, but maybe that's not a lifetime calling. Maybe it's just like a for now, you know what I mean?
Totally. And also sometimes I think we feel like, the things we're good at or that make us feel good, we can monetize it. And sometimes you can't. Mm-hmm. And I think that's this other thing is like this message we're being told right now. It's like, do what you love and the money will come. Well, that's not always the case, is it? Yeah. And sometimes doing what you love should just be a hobby, because then you'll end up hating it. So we're just fed so many messages, and it's up to us to kind of clear through the clutter, but it is not easy. I'm not telling you that I'm an expert on any of this. I'm just trying to pay attention more and more to like what my body has been telling me all along. And sometimes I choose to listen and sometimes I don't.
Well, and I think that's why, we think about this spiral, because it's like, you're not always going directly there. Sometimes you're kind of circling it, but the hope is that we get closer and closer.
You know what? I think as well that, when I went to university, and I didn't do that part well either, back then you're taught to pick something, pick that thing, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what you're going to do. And back in the day, that was very debilitating for someone like me, because it's like, if you're going here, then all these other things that you like and are interested in, well, there's no place for them. And that's a really terrible way to live, right? When you feel like you have to choose that thing and then you choose nothing. And I think now we're at a point, a really great point in the world where you can actually carve so many different paths and these things can connect. And I think that's really an interesting place in the world for us. But I think the other thing is maybe like what we thought it would look like isn't what it's going to look like, but it can still present itself. And my example there is that I'd always wished I had gotten into radio and in that world, and I didn't. And then in my late 30s, after my big trip to Southeast Asia, I ended up volunteering at a community radio station. I ended up creating my own show. I ended up doing all these things. And so did it look like what I thought it would look like when I was 10 years old? No, but the world will keep showing up for you in ways that you can have these experiences. It just isn't looking like what you thought it would look like, but they're still there. You can still find these ways to do these things. That's also really interesting, right? We're not taught that either, right? I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, in all of these experiences, they kind of open us up and help us see like what's possible, like this trip that you took to Southeast Asia. So I'm curious, like before you went to Southeast Asia, what was your, like, give us some context on what your sort of adventures had been up to that point.
I was very lucky when I was very, very little. We lived in Australia for a year when I was 7. So that kind of set a little bit of a stage. And then in high school, I did, an exchange to Belgium, and I did little things like that. I moved out west when I was 18, and I was up to no good out there for several years. And then it was in my late 20s that travel started to become a constant in my life. And I was still working and doing things, but every year I was, I went to Costa Rica, I went to Cuba on a cycling trip. So it was becoming an addiction, I would say, a little bit more and more. I was getting hooked. And I think it was a good time in my life. Like late 20s is actually a kind of cool time to attach to that. And then I had met this person in the book. I was 31. So he was very adventurous and big time into travel. And so that became our life. I mean, we lived apart for several years, which was awesome, actually. And then we would meet up anywhere in the world and travel and do our thing and then come home, go our separate ways. And so it was certainly, adventure and travel and all of it and outdoorsy things were certainly on my radar.
Cool. So I guess this was a big trip. I mean, remind me how many months?
So I was on the road for 4 months and my partner was, 9 months on the road for this one.
Yeah. But you'd had some experience leading up to it. So, can you just, for listeners, can you kind of give just kind of broad brush overview, and then we can kind of dig into each country, but what were kind of the, what were the destinations along the way and sort of the plan for the trip?
Yeah. So we started in Thailand, went Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, China. And then he went on to like Myanmar, India. I think that was it. I mean, India's huge, but there was a slight agenda because he had people he had to see at certain points along the way. And also we were lucky, right? It was 90% backpacking, but 10% luxury. So about once a week, we would be at a luxury hotel and we had to get to that place by that date. And we'd have usually 24 hours there. And then we'd continue on. And our style was always to be on the road like every 2 days. So we were never staying anywhere for very long. I would say the longest we stayed anywhere would have been 3 nights for the absolute max. So it was tiring. And we were hustling. But it was very adventurous and very fun. Like he was an amazing person to travel with. So, and then the luxury was like a complete opposite experience, right? And we would show up there like dirty and gross. And, there's like very fancy people are staying in these hotels. These are high-end luxury hotels where, Angelina Jolie could have been there the week before. And then you have us like literally rolling up with backpacks, sweat, dirt, salt stains on our t-shirts, like disgusting. And, no one's showing up there with a backpack. And so, but the hotel staff always handled it very, very well. And they didn't phase them, but it was sometimes embarrassing.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was that like for you? Like, especially initially, the kind of the back, because you're like shoestring budget for part of it. And then, this high end, like, what was that like, the transition between the two? Did you have to make any sort of mental shift?
Well, again, we had been doing this for 4 years before. So it, this was still some there were a few places on this trip that were unbelievable, but we were pretty used to it. But yeah, certainly it's a little bit, you can tell that maybe people are looking at you going, what are they doing here? But you know what? At the end of the day, I didn't really care. People are people. And we would just make a beeline for our room, right? So we weren't hanging out in the lobby, and we made sure to pack 1 or 2 outfits that would make us somewhat fit in.
Right.
But it was fine. Nobody really cares about anybody else at the end of the day, do they?
No. And but it's funny, what's something that's coming to me, because I feel like, a couple bigger adventures that I've done recently, there's usually at the end of the trip, you stay someplace decent. And I'm just reflecting myself in, whether I'm proud of this or not, but I just feel like when you come back from an epic hike or something, it's almost like a badge of honor to show up disheveled and a mess, it's because what you just, everybody else doesn't know, but you know what you did. And so there's almost this pride of showing up like that. I'm ready for my hot shower and to put on some nicer clothes, but
totally. And the thing is as well, and I'm not putting anyone down that stays in luxury hotels, because if I could afford it, I would do it too. But you're not meeting super interesting people in a luxury hotel. It's a very isolating experience. So of course, I agree with you. Still to this day, the dirtier, the better. It is a badge of honor. I do hiking trips all the time, and I love that feeling, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, the people you're encountering in a luxury hotel, they cannot usually relate to the mess that you've arrived in. The staff was always pretty cool. I think they got a kick out of it more than anyone, right? To see this, these 2 disheveled people they would never expect to see. So that was always fun.
Oh my gosh. So I feel like we can talk for hours. So for listeners, I thought it would be fun to just, especially for those that have not been to Southeast Asia, kind of walk them through maybe a highlight from each country that you were in. And this is kind of 4 months. You've got tons of stories. But could we just kind of walk through each one, and maybe you can kind of just give us a brief overview of your experience there and maybe a highlight?
Yeah. So, Thailand is the popular one. Many people have been to Thailand. So the thing that surprised me, though, about Thailand is that we were in some areas where there was no English. As touristy as it is, the whole country does not speak English. So we got into a few predicaments there with being in rural areas where we couldn't communicate to find our way back. But Thailand is, as everyone says, it's very, very beautiful. It's got beautiful beaches. I think the story that sticks out for me there was the Songkran Water Festival. And have you been to Thailand?
No, I've passed through Bangkok, but I didn't leave the airport.
Okay. So yeah, I write about it in the book, but this is basically a 5-day water festival, and it is intense. So you're basically just being bombarded with buckets of water, balloons of water, fire hoses full of water. They take it quite seriously. So that was something that was interesting. But yeah, Thailand is beautiful. Laos.
I heard you say predicament. I got to get hung up on that word. What you talked about some predicaments.
So, yeah, in Thailand, I think we were surprised sometimes that there wasn't more English. And I know that sounds really ethnocentric, and that's not my intent, but it's such a touristy country, So yeah, once I know we had gone too far, sort of into the unknown, and got totally lost and couldn't find the buses or anything like that. So you're dealing with people that you're now playing charades with, and it's getting dark and it's night, and all that kind of fun stuff. So just things like that. But you know what, at the end of the day, 90% of people want to help you, and you can always get your message across even without language sometimes.
Yeah.
So just things like that. And then
as a teaching moment for people listening, what was your sort of guiding force in those moments where you felt like there's a predicament coming or you're in the middle of one?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and I write about this, but my partner was so well traveled that he was always very calm. But when he wasn't, then I would be like, "Uh-oh," So I think sometimes your anxiety can start hitting when you just you just feel like you're really somewhere where no one knows where you are, and no one's really getting what you need, and like you're trying to get back to this city that's like an hour or 2 hours away, and you're like, what are we going to do, like if we're stuck here, blah blah blah. But I think that you can't really start to panic until you know it's time to panic. And luckily, like that situation, we've done a lot of things like that. We've been in the back of cars in Nicaragua where like suddenly what was a taxi seems to no longer be a taxi, and you're like, did some random person just drive me into the countryside? Like this was not foreign to us. We had done like silly things like this many times. Yeah, I think you have to keep your head on your shoulders, and you can't be upset because people react to upset, right?
Yeah.
So you have to sort of be calm and smile and be friendly. And I don't know that men are always good at that. I'm not trying to generalize, but I think that they can accelerate this, and a man's energy is very different, right? When they're like feeling like no one's getting it, we need to be somewhere. So you really have to keep that in check. And I think sometimes that's when traveling with a man and a woman together is very helpful, right? You can sort of balance that out and compensate a little bit.
I love that.
Yeah, so there's a bit of that from time to time. And I'd say the thing about Thailand is that the sex industry really, really riled me up a lot. And I struggled with that. That was really hard for me. And I'm sure that hasn't changed since 2010. I'm sure it's still thriving, but it's not easy to be around that. And I found that tough in Thailand.
Yeah.
So would you like me to move on to the next country?
Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to let you share this, but Laos, the country, and how
Lao, the country. I mean, we were told when we were there, it's Lao, no S. So it's Laos, and some people call it Laos and Laos and all that. But to us, everyone who was from there would say Lao. So I say Lao.
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of my stories come from Lao, to be honest. But the one that everyone loves and is part of the title is the jungle trek with the leeches. And I'll get into that in a minute. But Laos is very different from Thailand. And again, I haven't been there since 2010, but Thailand's pretty progressive, and people are not going to find it too terribly different from what we know. But Laos was very different in 2010. Much more underdeveloped, much more felt like you were going back in time, way less English, except for like in some of the places like Luang Prabang and things like that, where it's a bit more touristy, but very different from Thailand, which is kind of fun, right? Because it should be like that. It should be authentic when you're going away. But the big story from there was that, I mean, I'm pretty active. So traveling is often sitting. You're sitting in buses and trains, and it's awful sometimes, you're kind of a prisoner to that lifestyle. So I really wanted to go do something active. So we found this 3 to 4 day jungle hike. And it was awful. Like they warned us, there'll be leeches, there'll be bees. And we were a bit drunk when we signed the waiver, and we thought, can't be that bad. And it was really, really bad, really hot, stupidly hot. They had promised to provide us with water. They didn't. So we were dehydrated. There were literally leeches everywhere crawling up people's legs.
Oh my God.
Up their into their sleeping bags. Like it was nonstop leeches. I remember the guy in front of me who had shorts on, which was a dumb call on his part. And I just remember seeing his calves, and there was just blood pouring down both of his calves because there were 6 leeches on each leg, right?
Yeah.
So that was interesting. That's one that I don't recommend, that experience.
Yeah, not something that you would sign up for intentionally, but
no.
I mean, fun story to come back and share.
It's a great story. And I think the other thing about this country is that it doesn't get the recognition that a lot of those other countries do because of the history, right? We talk about the Vietnam War. We talk about Cambodia more than we talk about Laos, but Laos has also gone through hell and nobody talks about it. And even I write about in the book, the secret war, that was a secret, and we were having bombs dropped on them for like 9 years. I found that I learned so much more about history from being in Laos, and it was really it really affected me, because again, they're, very rural people living the best life that they can in very dire circumstances. And it's, we went to villages where there were bombs, like unexploded bombs, in places that they were still like collecting. And anyway, Laos is very interesting and it's beautiful.
I love it. So I want to pause, because the leeches thing almost sounds kind of like a low light. And I mean, it sounds like a fun story, but if you're a ambassador for Laos and you want to, share something that you really enjoyed about that country, what would you say?
So there's is it the capital, Luang Prabang? And I'm probably not doing it any justice, but it's the main city. It's beautiful. It's very European because there's French influence in Laos. And I love that city. It's a real mix of locals and tourists and beautiful markets. So that has a real vibe, that city. And it's on the river, which is beautiful. But there's some villages in northern Laos that are well worth anyone's visit. And you have to take like a slow boat to get there, which is long. Like they're called long-tailed slow boats. So, but they are totally worth it. They're remote, and in one of the villages doesn't have cars. I'm sure it still doesn't. And you just are immersed in a real fishing village where not everyone would want to go there. Accommodations aren't great, but a beautiful, beautiful remote world where you go back in time and you wake up and you're seeing like little girls chopping mangoes, and they're looking after all the little kids, and people are working, and it's just teeming with life, even though there's small populations.
Yeah, I love that. And this is super fun for me because I've read all this in your book, but to sit here and like listen to you talk about it, it's very cool. Okay, take us to Cambodia.
Cambodia is my favorite of those countries that we were in. And I don't know, well, I might know why, but there's a magic there that I felt with the people. The people are very funny. Yeah, they have a great sense of humor. And that's another country, right? They've been through hell. So a very good friend of mine is Cambodian and was born in Cambodia during the time that Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge were taking over the country and murdering people and just ruining that country. So I think there was a little bit of a different experience for me because I finally understood my friend, and I will not lie, I did not know about that history until I got there. So that was very interesting, but it can be upsetting. There's a lot there to see that's upsetting, but the Cambodian people are just so resilient, and they don't really talk to you about it. They will, but they just want to move ahead and they want to laugh. And so I really had a great time in Cambodia. It was really, really special for me. And we went to this, I did a lot in Cambodia, actually. I had some really wild, amazing experiences. But one of the coolest things was there's a town called Battambang, Bong, and I wrote about it. And they have this like bamboo train that you get on, and you see them basically build it with like very limited materials. There's like some metal wheels and bamboo rafts and a blanket, and like it's insane. I don't even know how to describe it. So you have to read my book for that. But that was nuts. Like, it's just like you have these moments where you're like, what am I doing? But also I'm having the most fun ever. Yeah, and I could probably die and it'll be fine. Like, like you have to accept your fate when you're constantly putting your safety into the lives of strangers. But we had this amazing guy that we met off the bus who like took us in and took us around this town and took us into his house and took us to the market. And so that was Cambodia to me is like, it's full of magic.
Yeah. And when I can feel it, but I also heard you say it, like in all that, it was all about the people.
It's often about the people, right? I mean, we'll probably talk about that, but yes, the people there really got into my heart a big time in Cambodia. That was my probably my favorite experience.
Love it.
What comes after that? Oh, Vietnam. Well, Vietnam's different, right? It's a little bit I would put Vietnam and Thailand as similarities in some ways because it's more progressive, of course, and they're very business oriented people in Vietnam. They're working a lot. We had a guide there that looked at us like we were crazy. She was in her probably late 20s or 30s. This is Lipstick Smith in the book. And she was just like, who do you think you are to take time off out of your lives and travel? It's like, we work, like, so that was an interesting discussion. Yeah, it's busy, right? In those big cities, and there's mopeds everywhere and motorcycles, and it does not stop. They do not stop. I mean, there's obviously remote areas of Vietnam that are not like that, but it is a busy, busy place, but very, very beautiful. And I guess my good story from there is we took what is called a hydrofoil, a boat, and it sits quite deep in the water, and I've never heard the word before, so maybe we have a different word for it, but I don't know. But it's like a sort of like a passenger boat, and we took it to get to this island, and it's very enclosed. And it, as you know, you read it, it was hell on earth because there's no air, and they literally pass out black garbage bags for people to throw up in. Oh. And we had no idea. And my partner had no clue. He was outside, like holding on to a railing that they allowed him to do that. He was having a great time. I was stuck, like sardined in with all these Vietnamese people who were like throwing up all around me. That was very challenging. Oh, and that's not uncommon, and that's in the book as well. But in that part of the world, you're constantly being given a black garbage bag to either spit in or barf in or whatever it is. That's just how it goes. It's really gross, actually.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Leeches and black garbage bags and
yeah. So that was, but Vietnam is good. The food's obviously amazing. Yeah. And sadly,
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you, because you when you first talked about Vietnam, I heard you just say, "Oh my gosh, it's beautiful." And I'm just curious, like for listeners and for me, can you, like, when you say beautiful, can you describe the landscape and that beauty?
There's, it's along the coast, right? That's the geography of Vietnam. So the scenery is often like cliffs and islands and what they call limestone karsts everywhere. That's a lot of that area of the world, to be honest. But just like the views across the sea are really, really beautiful. And it's very lush, like very lush vegetation. Yeah. And then there's something, Ha Long Bay is very popular in northern Vietnam. I think it's the north, but I could be wrong. Yeah, actually, I think I am wrong. But you go and it's a very popular thing to do because it's like a UNESCO World Heritage Site with these like cascading mountains and hills that everyone goes to see, and cliffs and caves everywhere. So it is a very beautiful part of the world. And they film like the James Bond movie in that part of the world as well, right? So, and we did stay at a phenomenal luxury resort there for 2 days because they won't let you stay for less than that. So they actually like ferry you across in a speedboat. This place was like nothing I had ever stayed in before. Like you have butlers and you're almost living in this like luxurious tree house. And the restaurant, they have like a restaurant on a cliff with like lights everywhere. And that was like being in a dream, that was over the top.
It's such a rich experience. I just love the balance of the budget side. Yeah. It's crazy. All right. Well, let's take us to China.
China, the hardest country for me. I mean, I'd been on the road for a long time for me at that point. We're leading into the 4th month, I guess. So I was very tired, and China's not easy. So it's a very big country. There's a lot of people. And if you're in Beijing or Shanghai, Beijing is very old, obviously. I mean, the whole country is very old, but Shanghai feels a bit more European. It's a bit more international. It's a bit more modern. Beijing, maybe less so, but full of history, obviously. But it was hot. July was it was torture. Of course, everyone's on vacation in China in July, so you have even more people everywhere. And it's a very beautiful country, again, with like limestone karsts and mountains and cliffs and beautiful like lakes and water, and it's a stunning place, but it's not an easy place, right? It's very different. So I found a hard time with the food, and I hate squat toilets, and that's like most of China. And the big story there is we stayed in what is called a roundhouse in rural China in the Hakka communities there there's less and less Hakka people, but we did this. It took us a while to get there. You're in the middle of nowhere and you're staying in this big round house that houses like 600 to 800 people. Wow. And it's very rickety and old, and your room is like a bucket. A bucket for your business, like a naked light bulb, some planks, a padlock to lock it, and that's your night. And it was a little bit terrifying, but it's like the leeches thing, right? It's like, It's a great story. We did it, wouldn't do it again, but these are the things you do.
So I'm curious though, like some of these, like the leeches, this experience, like, do these like pop up in your head as reminders when you're getting ready to do something hard, but not that hard?
Yes and no. I mean, last year I was in Colombia for 3 weeks, and the last week was a jungle trek. I don't know why I continue to do jungle treks, because I actually hate them. But every experience is different, right? I think on the one in Colombia, I was like, oh yeah, now I remember why I hate these. I don't know. I think these memories like teach you things, but I think we're always in the moment, right? And like, things are painful. But I think traveling overall gives you a resilience. And I think as you get older and you do more and more of this, it's temporary. So you'll be fine. You will survive it. There will be highs, there will be lows, but it's not forever. And I think that's sort of what keeps building as you do more.
So we'll kind of pivot to the book a little bit. The title of the book is The People You Meet. And then there's a long subtitle, Luxury, Leeches, Love, and Lao Lao, with a host of interesting characters in Southeast Asia. And it's almost like Southeast Asia and the 5 countries that you visited are an afterthought in that title. The title is The People You Meet. So I wonder if you could talk about why you chose that title and how the people were kind of the core element of this trip for you.
The title came later. I always wanted the title to be like Luxury, Leeches, Love, and Lao Lao, but I got a lot of people's opinions and it didn't fly, and they were right. So it's an awesome subtitle, but I just woke up one morning and I knew The People You Meet was the title, but for me, it made a ton of sense because I think it's always about the people. So no matter what you do, where you go, it's the people that make or break the experience. And when you're traveling with somebody, as I was with my partner, you meet less people, I mean, people treat you differently when you're in a partner. You are also different because you don't always need to meet more people because you have a person. So there's that as well. But no, I think that it's always the people. You come home from anything and you can say Colombia was a magical, beautiful country, and it truly is. But because I was with the people that I met, it made it even that much better. And I think if anyone travels, they will tell you the same thing, that it is always about that.
Have you solo traveled?
Yeah, and I don't love it, to be honest. I mean, I will solo travel. Like I was in Mexico for a few weeks on my own in 2023. I'm good for only that amount of time. And then I find it challenging. Yeah. My preference, but it depends what you do. Like if I went and lived somewhere, like I lived in Quebec City for 5 weeks by myself, that I could have stayed forever and not had any friends, and I would have been totally fine. I love that. But when you're like on the move traveling, I find it harder to be alone for so many reasons. But one is like, I don't love temporary relationships. And if I'm going to be with someone for like a couple of hours that day, I'm not so invested. Like I want more. Right. And so my preference is actually to do like adventure trips on my own, but in a group. So group travel. Yeah. So like you're with 10 to 15 strangers. That is heaven for me. I find that very entertaining.
Same. Yeah. Me too. I was just curious because like I heard you say like traveling with somebody, you're less likely to meet other people. And I just thought that was interesting because, it's always about the people. And I have talked to some solo travelers that have had kind of said something similar, that they prefer solo travel because you're like more in a position to be able to meet more people. So like I definitely see both sides of that. I think but to your point, like it's always about the people, whether you go alone or not, like you're going to be with people.
Totally. And I guess for me, I like going alone on a group trip because then it's like you're not beholden to anybody. So
Right.
that's my preference. But yeah, if I go completely on my own, I mean, I've met some awesome people doing that too, but I think I'm a bit more reluctant. I'm a bit more like choosy, I guess, when I'm totally on my own. And I like that kind of safety in a group of like 10 people. I find it very fun.
Yeah. So we're kind of getting, I mean, I said we talk for 2 more hours, but there's a couple more highlights that I want to cover. Like I heard you say something earlier in the conversation about how we're never satiated in the Western world. And so it's kind of an East versus West question. And so I'm just curious, like, we do have sort of the creature comforts, and even, I mean, there's comforts over there too. Obviously you had luxury over there, but I would love to talk a little bit about like just, some of the ways that we do things in the West that you've become comfortable with that are sort of just your way of doing things, and how that contrasts with cultural things that are very, very different there, and like how you sort of adjusted to those things. Does that make sense?
Yes. I think for me that the things that I take from that, it's not really about behaviors. I guess that it is. What I see is that people in lesser socioeconomic areas or in the Eastern world, and then it's not all like that, but when you do see poor communities, they do seem happier. And I feel like in the West, we're very isolated. We live in silos. We have our friends, we have family, we have, but even like working from home or just the way that we interact and the way that we create our lives is so different. And I feel like when you go to these other countries, I mean, out of necessity, they often live together intergenerationally and in small places, but everyone has a purpose, everyone has a job, they work together, they look after each other, and they look happier to me, in my mind, from an outsider. And I have been able to interact with various people in different ways. And I think it's that message, and this is not new information. Anyone will tell you this, but I think it's that we learn that it's like being with more people, helping each other, and having less. Like I think that a lot of those places are just trying to survive every day, and that's it. And so for us, like for most of us, and not all of us, but general survival isn't really something that we're like, oh, I got through this. So that's why I think we take all that for granted, and we want, like, we're just always looking for what's best and what's better and what will improve my life. Whereas in these other countries, that's not even on their radar. They're like, and they do, like, the simpler the life to me looks happier.
On this trip, like you got to 4 months, and there was a point, and you can see and feel the progression in the book, but you got to a point where you just decided like enough is enough and you were ready to go home. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
So I had met somebody earlier in this story, the woman who we call B, and she was awesome. She was like in her 50s at the time. I was in my 30s. She was very well traveled, the most interesting person. And we were somewhere in Laos, I think, waiting to catch a boat or whatever we were doing. And she saw these 2 young girls that were like in their 20s and was watching them and just said to me, they're done. They need to go home. And that created a whole story or dialogue together about recognizing when it's time to go home, when the trip is done, when you're no longer enjoying it, when it becomes a job, and that you're not benefiting anyone, especially the country that you're in, by staying. It's over, you're done. And that there's so much ego in travel sometimes. I'm going to stay out longer. I'm going to go to more countries. I'm just going to keep going, even though I'm over it, right? So that really helped me to recognize and to be okay with saying I've had enough. And I was not happy. I was exhausted. I was so sleep deprived. It's interesting because the reason we travel is to break free of normalcy and schedules. And I was craving that. I wanted structure, and I knew it was over for me. And so I was done.
So this is just, it's a thought that I just had, but this is really interesting. I don't know that I've ever had an experience in my life where there wasn't like an end date. I believe you went on this trip, like when you left, you didn't know when you were coming home. Is that right?
I had a return ticket after 3 months, but I had built it in that if I wanted to extend that, it wouldn't cost me a lot to change it. And I'd also gone to a psychic, right? And I'm not, that was just for fun.
Yeah.
But I also listened to her, and she had said to me, you're going to go. You probably won't last a year, and you'll know when it's time. And she was completely right.
Yeah.
And I think my partner was also ready, but he was so determined to make these business connections. But when you're on the move every 2 days, it is exhausting. So it's a natural, it's natural to say, I'm done, and just being able to do it.
Yeah. And that makes total sense. I'm just trying to think, for me, like thinking through this idea of like going on a trip where you're not 100, you don't have like a definite plan, like an end date, because I don't know, like for me, like if you know exactly when you're coming home, like that date starts to approach and maybe you're excited about it, but it's like, it's like already predefined, as opposed to going like what you did, I think is so cool. It's like this neat life experience where you go and you actually like you find your limit, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Deadline, you kind of don't, maybe you don't know whether you've hit your limit or not. Does that make sense?
Totally, because you're right. I mean, I've done other trips where I was only gone for 2 or 3 weeks and I cried the whole way home because I was like, I'm not done. I'm not ready. Yeah. So it actually was a beautiful thing to know I was done. And trust me, that was not easy to walk away and to leave, but it was the first time I ever got on a plane. And I was like, thank God I'm going home.
I think that's so cool, though. I'm going to probably reflect a little bit more on that. I hadn't actually connected that until now. I'll probably follow up with you after. I might have more questions. But so can you just tell us briefly about, like, obviously this whole time we've been talking about the book, but how can people get a copy of it, and anything you want to share about the creation of it?
Sure. So the book is on Amazon, and look up my name with it. So The People You Meet, Melissa Rodway, and then that awesome subtitle that we keep talking about. That's probably the best for international listeners. If you're in Canada, there's a few bookstores carrying it, but for now, Amazon is the way to go. And Instagram is good for me to fly_travel_media. I post a lot of things there. So those are 2 good resources for you.
Amazing. And you have a podcast.
I did. It's on hiatus. So when I came home from my trip in 2010, I obviously wasn't going anywhere for a while. I was very broke. And at the radio station where I was volunteering, I created a show. So I did it for like 6 years, and I interviewed a lot of really, really interesting people and built this awesome community. But when I started editing my book and decided to publish it, something had to go, and the podcast went. Yeah.
But we share that in common, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but your podcast was very similar in that you were having conversations with people that had been on adventures, and these were things that inspired you. So I'm curious, like for you, what were some of the benefits that you personally took away from your time with your podcast?
For one, the connection with people is amazing. And that's not the greatest word to use it, but it does really light your soul on fire when you meet people and connect with them from around the world. So I really love that. And it just made me, for some people, my story is probably really interesting and exciting and adventurous, and it is. But there are people that have done some wild things out there. So I think it just kept me thirsty to learn more and to know what the options are. And also, I went hiking in Turkey with someone I met on my podcast. We'd never met in real life, but we just got along. And so we met up in Turkey for a week and hiked around. And it's that kind of stuff too. It's like these things would never have happened if I didn't have my podcast, right? So it opens new doors.
Well, I get something like that I want to learn from you is like some of the other adventures we didn't even get into on this episode. Like I do know, I think it was from the like epilogue or the end of like your acknowledgements or something, that you did the O Trek in Patagonia, and connected with that because I just did the W Trek a couple of weeks ago. And so, I want to hear about more of your adventures, because it's the same thing for me as like I hear about these other adventures that people have done. It just causes my my vision board to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's certainly the inspiration that I get from other people that I've talked to that kind of keeps my fire going for going on these adventures myself. And so super grateful to you for sharing your stories and helping to inspire everybody, and myself included.
Oh, well, it's been a real pleasure, Scott. You ask great questions, and I love that you've read my book, and I really, really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you for giving me some time.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, we'll make sure to put a link to the book in the show notes for this. And so you have all of these adventures that we've just been talking about, this one in particular, Southeast Asia, the people you meet. You have this epic life story of all these things that you've done. And I know that at some point, Hollywood is going to pick up on your story.
That's the goal.
And when they do, I want to know who is going to play you in the movie they make about your epic life.
Well, Scott, it's going to be Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga. Oh my gosh. I love that. That is amazing. What a great answer. Lady Gaga. Oh my gosh. How cool. Okay. What's your movie going to be called?
It's going to be called What's Next, Melissa?
What's Next, Melissa, starring Lady Gaga. This is going to be epic. I am so excited. Melissa, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you, Scott. It was a real pleasure. I really appreciate it.
For those listening, I hope you have been inspired today as much as I have. Hope Melissa's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Melissa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Scott. That was great.